Great. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to see so many people are attending this very special AltaSea webinar, looking at green jobs and blue waters in our ports. My name is Val Zavala, and I'm very pleased to be moderating this discussion today. You may know me. I spent about 30 years at KCT Public Television in Los Angeles as a journalist and news anchor, news executive. I now retired a couple years ago, and I am very, very interested in the environment. Of all the issues I care about the most, I think this one is the most essential. We all know, of course, that the port, we're going to look at the port and green jobs today, is one of the biggest economic engines, not just of California, but of the country for that matter. How can that engine run both clean and green? AltaSea is dedicated to seeing how the ocean economy and sustainability can converge, and how a green economy can also create a blue ocean. Today's discussion will focus on investing in zero emissions technology and infrastructure at our ports. And we're looking in particular at a bill that has been introduced in the House by our Congresswoman Nanette Diaz Barragán. It proposes making $1 billion available each year for, I believe, 9 years. She can elaborate on this a little later. The money would be invested in clean technology, renewable and green jobs, renewable energy and green jobs. We'll learn more about that in a moment. And don't forget that you can ask your questions through the chat mode, and I will be getting to them as soon as possible. But first, let me introduce our panelists. Tim McOsker is CEO of AltaSea. He is a lifelong resident of San Pedro and an attorney with more than 3 decades of experience in leadership in government, regulatory, and land development matters. He served as the Chief of Staff and Chief Deputy City Attorney for former LA Mayor James Hahn. He has served as City Attorney to various other Southern California jurisdictions. For the past 2.5 years, Tim has served as CEO of AltaSea. His deep experience in land development, environmental issues, permitting, municipal law, all that complicated stuff is crucial for the growth of AltaSea campus. Tim also serves on the governing boards of nonprofits, including Link Housing, the San Pedro Chamber of Commerce, the Historic Waterfront Business Improvement District, among others. And he's a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and UCLA Law School. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you very much, Val.
Also joining us is Professor Jason Scorse. Jason is a professor at Middlebury Institute of International Studies up in Monterey. He completed his PhD in Agriculture and Natural Resources Economics at UC Berkeley in 2005, with a focus on environmental economics and policy, international development, and behavioral economics. He now teaches courses in environmental and natural resource economics, as well as ocean, coastal, and behavioral economics. In 2009, he was promoted to the chair of the International Environmental Policy Program, and in 2011, he became director of the Center for the Blue Economy. He's consulted for major environmental groups, including the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, Earth Justice, and Oceana. He's the author of What Environmentalists Need to Know About Economics, published in 2010. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much.
And also with us is, we're very honored to have U.S. Congresswoman Nanette Diaz Barragán. Nanette was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives 4 years ago. She's the first Latina ever to represent California's 44th Congressional District. Her district includes Carson, Compton, Linwood, North Long Beach, Rancho Domingo, San Pedro, Southgate, Watts, Willowbrook, and Wilmington, among others, and of course, the Port of Los Angeles. She was born in Harbor City, just north of San Pedro. She's the youngest of 11 children raised by immigrants from Mexico. Nanette graduated from UCLA and USC Law School. She went on to work in the Office of Public Liaison for the Clinton White House and then for the NAACP. Her first elected office was to the Hermosa Beach City Council, where she also served as their mayor. She fought powerful oil companies and stopped a proposal to drill 34 oil and water injection wells in Hermosa Beach and out into the Santa Monica Bay. In 2016, she was elected to Congress. She now serves on the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and the exclusive House Committee on Energy and Commerce. Nanette has fought consistently for communities suffering the effects of poor health from pollution, climate change, and inadequate health care. Thank you so much for being with us, Congresswoman. Now, I mentioned the bill that you have introduced. It's called the Climate Smart Ports Act. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that would do and why you feel it's so important?
Sure. So the Climate Smart Ports Act is a bill that I introduced because of pollution that we have. We're surrounded by 3 freeways and the Port of LA. And so while the ports create all these fantastic jobs, and I'm a supporter of those, we said, how do we invest in the ports and in the communities around here so that we can help clean up the air and the emissions coming from ports? So what it is, it's really an incentive for the movement toward a clean economy and clean energy. And so it creates a fund. And so it's a fund of $1 billion a year for 10 years that will help ports make that transition, and the availability of grants for them to buy these zero emissions technology. The technology is there, but frankly, it's a cost issue. And so this is an incentive to help help ports around the country, it's not just the Port of LA, to invest and to go green.
So the money is a grant?
The money is a grant. It's a grant program that the federal government will be providing to allow the purchase of technology that is used at the ports. And one of the things that was really important for me when we worked with stakeholders was to make sure that there was a provision that would not allow these dollars to be used for automation, because here at the port, a huge issue of contention, and we wanted to be able to save dollars. So this will, think of it as an infrastructure investment. It's money that will be used to help purchase equipment and have a clean infrastructure, which is why it got into the House Democrats' infrastructure bill that was just passed.
But that's important. It's not automation that will displace workers. I saw that in the bill. It's specifically not for that kind of technology. That's great.
Right. So it's things like, cargo handling equipment, it's port, harbor, craft, drayage trucks, and emissions. And I think that we're trying to get there. That's the future.
Got it. Tim, what are your thoughts on this, and how does this dovetail with what AltaSea's mission is?
Well, first, I think it's absolutely terrific, and we're really, really, really honored to have the Congressmember with us today, and we applaud the bill and the idea of this infrastructure investment and what I'll also call innovation investment in the port, because that's really what AltaSea is all about. As you know, and we've said it at prior webinars, AltaSea is a nonprofit. We're in partnership with the Port of Los Angeles. And our partnership results in this 50-year lease for 35 acres of land, where a big component of what we are doing is we are setting aside about 180,000 square feet of area for business innovation, business incubation, and established businesses that are all in the blue economy, which Jason is going to more eloquently than I discuss in a little bit. All folks in the blue economy. And the idea with the blue economy is to sustainably use and avail ourselves of ocean resources to create economic development and really, really good jobs and improve our lives, all with the eye towards sustaining the ocean and the earth for the future. So what the Congresswoman is doing is going to her colleagues and making available federal dollars that can be invested into the technologies and into the products that businesses like ours will be producing. I can see shore power, Congresswoman, being really, really, really plugging in ships. I can also see alternatives to shore power being innovated at our site, just as a couple of examples. So I think it's absolutely terrific for us as AltaSea to work with the federal government and the local government and private industry to create this whole infrastructure, human infrastructure and intellectual infrastructure of sustaining the planet for the future. I think it's great.
Thank you. Jason, you've looked at economics, environment, and ports and ocean. What are your thoughts on greening our ports? And it seems like a big job. Are we up to the task?
Yeah, so a couple quick points. I first really want to applaud the Congresswoman for this bill. I think it's a great piece of legislation, and I hope it passes shortly. A couple quick things just to point out. There's a big climate change piece in this because ports produce a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. But a key point that I think is often missed is the big part of switching off of fossil fuels is for the air pollution and air quality benefits, right? Is that, hundreds of thousands of Americans die from respiratory illness due to air pollution. And a lot of that in our cities is coming from ports. And as I'm sure the Congresswoman, is aware, it's also often our poorest and, disadvantaged communities that are bearing the brunt of this. So this is a real environmental justice issue. And you're in the perfect place to do this, right? The port of Los Angeles and Long Beach have been the big innovators in ports in the nation. They've already electrified a lot. And so to extend that to a national program and give these grants, I think is absolutely the right way to go. And not only can we do it, but we should do it, ASAP.
Congresswoman, one of the aspects of the bill I was reading deals a lot with job creation. And in particular, it zeroes in on certain groups of people that would ideally be given a leg up on this, those who have, like, I think vets and other groups. Can you elaborate on that, on the job creation aspect of your bill?
Yeah, let me just first elaborate on something that Jason said. One of the reasons that how this bill came about was right here in this congressional district. It has some of those heavily polluted air, the congressional district, we have been hearing a lot and seeing firsthand the impact it has had in the local community. Sometimes if you're in Wilmington, for example, you'll see kids at the parks. Some of them have inhalers around their neck because there's so much asthma that is a result of air pollution, for us to make sure we had everybody at the table. And so when we came to drafting this bill, we reached out to labor, we reached out to ILWU, we reached out to the ports, we reached out to environmental justice groups to make sure all the stakeholders had an input. And that's how we were able to build a big coalition to get behind it and to get it moved. And so in this situation, we have provisions in the bill that will provide an incentive to hire locally, because we want to create the jobs here. So as much as we can hire locally, that's one of the provisions in the bill. It's also meant to create clean jobs, whether it's for the microgrids, whether it's for the technology. And so that's the bulk of where we want to see the dollars are going. Really, it's a local, really a local spin that we want to see, because we want the dollars to go here. Now, we happen to be a district that's very diverse. It's almost 90% Latino, African American. We have a number of veterans here. And so we're hoping those jobs are going to go to those right here in our backyard.
Tim, how does AltaSea, how do you interface with the Congresswoman in terms of moving this bill forward? Because she's got this nice diverse coalition. I assume AltaSea is part of that. Are you allowed to get involved in political legislation?
Well, we're a 501c3, and so we follow all of those rules. But our mission is to advance the blue economy. So our missions are really aligned here. To advance the blue economy, our mission is to build both a sustainable Earth and an equitable Earth. I mean, our diversity commitment is like the Congresswoman's and like Jason's is we're really, really, really committed to equity and fairness. And here at AltaSea at the Port of Los Angeles, we are ringed by census districts that have high poverty and have real need for opportunity. And so the this harbor, like many harbors around the world, ironically create this vast wealth that runs through the shipping lines, but it's very often surrounded by folks that are not participating fully in those opportunities. So our commitment at AltaSea is to create jobs at our site, ongoing jobs at our site. And I think also one of the pieces that we're going to be talking about probably today is that we also need workforce development, because we're talking about new jobs of the future. And these new jobs in the blue economy are going to require new skills. And so our partnership with the Congresswoman is extraordinarily important. And we also, our partnerships with the community college system and with the local high schools and with the school district and the other NGOs who are developing our youth are also extraordinarily important.
Congresswoman, I'm sorry. Yes, go right ahead.
If I may, I want to just take a moment to recognize the incredible work that AltaSea is undertaking, right here in my backyard at the port, by building a campus that's going to bring together the scientists, the educators, policymakers, and entrepreneurs to create new jobs and industries in emerging ocean economy, right? It's the vision of AltaSea for a more sustainable and equitable world that's inspiring. And I'm fortunate to not just have AltaSea in my congressional district, but really in my hometown. And so I'm really looking forward to working with AltaSea in the innovative ideas that will come out of this and projects that the campus is going to be leading. And so at the heart of having that at the port is really, I think, going to make a critical difference and will help me as a legislator be able to go back to my committee, Energy and Commerce, that does everything environment, to bring the ideas and the concepts there to say, how do we get this done? How do we carry it out? And how can we partner with the federal government to make it a reality? And so the climate smart fits with that mission of what he's doing. And it's just the start. I believe that this economic engine, which is the blue economy.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're having a little trouble with your bandwidth, Nanette, because you've been stopping and starting a bit. We got most of what you said, fortunately, but I think at the moment your bandwidth is low, so hopefully it will improve a little bit. In the meantime, Jason, can you elaborate on what the Congresswoman was saying, and how does your institute, how did you get involved in this in the first place, and what will you contribute to the cause?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, first of all, I want to second the Congresswoman's point about AltaSea. I really was excited to learn about this, and one of the people who's on my board of my organization works with AltaSea, and it's just an amazing thing. I can't wait till the pandemic eases and I can go visit and see it in person. But coming back to the larger blue economy, you know, at the Center for the Blue Economy in Monterey, we really study all the ways to make ocean industry sustainable and all the economic benefits that come from that. And we really see as we're seeing the Democrats get very, very serious about climate. And we're really pushing for ocean and blue economy components of that, which weren't in the original conception. So a couple of years ago, when the Democrats started talking about this, there was very little mention of the oceans. But our organization and a number of others have really been pushing, and we're really happy to see, like the Congresswoman's bill and other bills, that the Democrats are really starting to see that the ocean is going to be a huge engine for both climate solutions, but also because the impacts of climate change are pronounced in coastal areas. It's going to be really where a lot of the innovation and adaptation comes in. And I'm sure AltaSea is going to be at the forefront of a lot of that work as well.
Right. Yeah, Tim, you're an expert in partnerships. I guess it seems like you couldn't do it without these partnerships and the specific skills and expertise that each one of them bring to the cause.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the truest thing you said is we couldn't do it without partnerships. And we're really, really all about creating a web or a network of partners to be able to do all of this together. In the beginning and the end, what AltaSea is a convener. We're a partner with the Port of Los Angeles, obviously, who's deeply committed to this. We're a partner with our Congresswoman, and we have this great partnership with Jason and his institute. We've also been fortunate to sign a partnership just recently with UC San Diego to do with the Scripps, which is one of the finest institutes in the world, to do sharing of information and of research and sharing of opportunity at their site and at our site. We have equally, we have a partnership with Oregon State University through, just as Jason identified, this is all about people, having relationships with people across regions and across industries. And our goal is to bring everybody together. And one of the things that we say in our staff meetings is that we want to be the world's greatest water cooler. We want to be a water cooler for the future of this planet, and certainly a water cooler for the road to the future of this planet is through a sustainable, just, equitable ocean.
Got it. Congresswoman, I see that you have a lot of people have signed onto this bill. What are the next steps, and what are the chances you think of getting the kind of support it takes to get passed? Because you've got, I think, at least a dozen other co-sponsors.
Right. Well, we have a number of members. We have a huge coalition. Locally, I'm really proud to have everybody from ILWU to Indivisible San Pedro, We also have the Harbor Association of Industry and Commerce, the San Pedro and Peninsula Homeowners. It's a Green for All Alliance. It's pretty big. Now, what happened with this bill was kind of rare, actually. Generally, a member of Congress will introduce a bill, and lots of bills get introduced, and many of them sit there for a while. You know, you got to really lobby just to get a hearing on it, and it takes a lot of time and work to get the bill even onto the House floor for any kind of a vote. But in this instance, we were able to get the bill introduced, and because between my staff and I, and frankly, most of this is staff work, that was able to build these coalitions and work with so many stakeholders that got support behind the bill. We were able to go to Speaker Pelosi and say, look, we're talking about an infrastructure bill, and you can't have an infrastructure bill unless you include the ports. And there's a demand right now for environmental justice with the systematic racism across the country. And so I basically made the case that there really wasn't a lot in an infrastructure bill that related to ports, and the ports needed a voice. They had to be included. And to remind everybody that the ports are great job creators and they're huge economic engines, but they're also polluters. And so that we had to get this done. As a result of that, Speaker Pelosi actually put our bill into the infrastructure package. So it has already gotten out of the House of Representatives, and it has passed. It's now in the hands of the Senate. And so Senator Merkley from Oregon has introduced it in the Senate and is trying to get it moved there. And frankly, the way this is going to work is when the administration or the Senate Republicans come to the table on an infrastructure bill is where we really need it. We really need it to get pushed. So we're also asking that the Committee for Energy and Commerce that I sit on help elevate it and have a hearing on it. Again, it was rare because usually there's a hearing in committee and then it goes to a vote. In this situation, given COVID and everything that's been happening and the move for an infrastructure bill, we were able to get it included in an infrastructure bill already and passed out of the House. So it's pretty remarkable that has been able to happen. And let me say one more thing is, let's say that we don't get an infrastructure bill done this year, and I'm hopeful that we can try to push and get something done, but there's not that many days left in the legislative session until elections hit. This is a framework of what we need to see. There's got to be more that's put into an infrastructure bill, don't get me wrong, but this is the starting framework in saying, hey, we can't leave out the ports, and we've got to make sure we tie this to the blue ocean economy, and as Jason said, moving away from the fossil fuel investments, which has got to be clean energy, clean investments in microgrids.
Boy, that is fantastic news. I did not realize it was enveloped inside the infrastructure bill. That's an incredible boost. That's fantastic. Someone asked about greening our ports, and in particular, and I remember this story a while ago, I think it was the Port of LA, converted all its small trucks and to green energy, the forklifts, all the smaller vehicles that move cargo and so forth, were converted to electric, I think. I'm not sure, maybe it was diesel. So someone asked, what about the efforts already to green the port?
If I could speak to that for just 1 second, I'm sure the Congresswoman would add to this.
Great.
I want to speak for my partner, the Port of Los Angeles. We are a nonprofit in partnership with the Port. The Port of Los Angeles and the combined ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, I think, are on the forefront of this issue and have done some of the best work around the world, certainly the best work in the country for the plug-in ships, which to date still only applies to some of the ships, but to the biggest polluters, and we can go farther and we can plug in more ships in the future. And the port has been on the forefront of looking to its tenants, and I think in a piece-by-piece fashion, they can speak for themselves, but I think piece by piece what they have been doing is requiring folks to take these yard hustlers or this yard equipment and turn them over to electric or zero emission equipment. And I think what happens in Los Angeles and what happens in Long Beach becomes a standard for the country and can become a standard for the world, which is why it's so important that our Congressmember here has introduced this bill and continues to put this region on the forefront of this important issue.
And I want to remind people, by all means, we're taking your questions. You can ask them through the Q&A function, and they will get to me via text.
Thank you, Tim. And I just wanted to add to Tim, absolutely right. And the Port of LA has been at the forefront of greening the ports. But most of the technology is still not zero emissions. They're cleaner. They may be fewer emissions, but not zero emissions. So the goal for us was, how do we get to meet the zero emissions? Right. And one of the goals that is actually in place right now at the ports is to replace hundreds of pieces of cargo handling equipment with zero emissions technology by 2030. Another is to replace 100% of the drayage trucks carrying cargo to and from the ports with zero emissions vehicles by 2035. And so this provides an incentive and makes it easier to get there. One of the things I want to mention is the port and the surrounding neighborhood here is one thing too, but then there are communities between the ports and where these trucks are coming from, and those could be inland. And then you have communities going through. You got the 710 freeway, which is probably the biggest one, and these communities are getting the terrible air pollution. So this will help invest in greening of vehicles too. That's going to have an overall impact. About 40% of Americans live within a few miles of a port, so I think it's a great investment, and it's just the start. We have to do more.
Great. This message or this question is for Jason. It's from Rachel. She says, hello everyone. I have several high school students viewing this webinar. Dr. Scorse, what are some areas of study that young people can pursue if they're interested in becoming part of the blue economy? Also, what are some entry-level positions that young people can be part of? That's it. Opportunities for young people. What should they study, and what kind of opportunities are there? So we have some high school kids watching. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. To be honest, almost all of the major disciplines that you would think about have a blue economy angle, right? Whether it's engineering, chemistry, biology, ecology, economics. So the key is really finding institutions that have people that are focused on ocean, work. And obviously California, we're very blessed. We have Scripps, we have UCLA, we have UC Santa Barbara, UC Santa Cruz, we have my school. So we were really a kind of a plethora of abundance of riches for education. In terms of entry-level positions, first of all, Tim's right here. They should send their CV to him, get a job at AltaSea. But in terms of entry-level positions, I think one thing we're really pushing for is new kind of coastal restoration. And there's going to be a huge, huge new industry in coastal restoration, living shorelines and rebuilding dune structures and mangroves and wetlands. And this is going to be amazing jobs. And if anyone's interested, they can email me after this, and I can give them some tips on where they might be able to get involved in that.
Great, good. And we'll make sure people have your email. Another question.
Before you go to that, can I just give a shout out to Rachel Bronke, who is so great about bringing her kids to the site in healthier times and online, and she's such a great asset in this community. To take the bait on AltaSea, one of the things that's going to be extraordinarily important to us is establishing these workforce development programs. And so we think, for example, that one of the great emerging industries here in Southern California out of AltaSea is going to be aquaculture, ocean farming in a sustainable way. And so we're working, for example, with one of our prospective tenants on a certification program so that we can actually have standards that will meet all of the health and safety requirements, both for the worker and for the product, and come up with a way where folks could go right into an industry, could learn and get certified and go into an industry which is really small in the United States right now, but important. And that's farming the ocean in a sustainable way, whether it's with bivalves like mussels or seaweeds that can go into food or into healthy product. So I just wanted to take the bait and say that AltaSea is going to be working with our local kids to make sure that we have great jobs for the future.
Great. Mary asks, does the bill, this would be a question for Nanette. Mary says, does the bill provide construction funding? What year's budget will it be available? 2021, question mark. And how and when and how much are the bill's construction goals to be funded? And who is the bill's administrator at the federal level? A lot of questions there. Did you get all those, Nanette, or would you like me to repeat?
So generally, I think I got them, and if I miss anything, you can re-ask it. Number one, this would create construction jobs because you're going to have to build the infrastructure to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place. So the funding that's going to be available will be also for port electrification and microgrids. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we have in the bill is the requirement of a prevailing local wage, a local prevailing wage in it, so that we make sure the dollars that are paid are at least the prevailing wage. I can't tell you when the funding will go into effect because the bill first has to pass. We have to get it out of the Senate. It's passed the House, but it's got to get out of the Senate, and then the president's got to sign it into law, even if it's a part of a bigger infrastructure bill. So it will be available, presumably, if it were to pass this year, would be available in the next year. So we got to first get it through the hurdle of getting it through and signed into law. That's the first thing. The rest of it's unclear. The EPA will be helping administering it. That's the goal of how it's going to run right now, and we won't know how they're going to do that until the bill gets passed and the EPA takes a look at how they're going to dole out the dollars. But I'll tell you one thing is that we need to make sure that when the bill passes, that we work very closely with the port and those who apply for grants to write letters of support and to get those dollars right here, because we already have an issue that our port produces more dollars and we don't get our fair share. And so we have to make sure to also do that once this legislation gets through.
Okay, got it. Oh, now we have a lot of questions coming fast and furious here. This one actually doesn't deal directly with port technology, but it says, it's an interesting question. I'm wondering about the thoughts the panel has when it comes to ocean ships working to change fuel to be better for the earth. Do you think the boat technology is moving fast enough? A little bit off topic, but an interesting question. Maybe Jason can handle that. Do you know about boat fuel?
Sure. So for people who don't know, boat fuel is right now is the dirtiest of all fuels. It's even dirtier than airplane fuel, jet fuel. It is really like, it's the dregs from the bottom of the barrel because most of it's burned out at sea. And so people don't, out of sight, out of mind. Obviously that changes when they come to port. And that's why a lot of cities, the biggest source of pollution is both the boats and then the trucks that are idling at the ports, and hence the Congresswoman's bill, would address at least that latter part. There isn't enough going on right now on boats. There is some movement. The International Maritime Organization, the IMO, is doing a lot. There's some big organizations in California and the United States that are working on what's called the Clean Cargo Initiative. And so that's, again, increasing fuel standards. But this is a pretty tough job. Some of it will come from more efficient hulls. And so the ships are just more streamlined and they don't need as much fuel. Some of it will come from hybrid technologies. There's also some hydrogen fuel cell technologies. There's potentially some cleaner fuels, some biofuels. So there's a lot on the table right now, but it's a real big priority because if we're going to get climate change under control and really, get this technology up and running in the next decade or two, it's going to need some R&D funding. And so we're calling for more federal R&D funding into these alternative fuel efficient systems for ships.
That's interesting. I did not realize that about ship fuel. A question for Nanette. You mentioned the diverse coalition of organizations and groups supporting it. How important is it for these kinds of legislative initiatives to make sure there's support from both business and environmental community? Because there's a huge gap between those two communities.
Right. So I'm going to write this down because I want to first just say a little something about the last question before I go into this one. Sure. I think this is where AltaSea and the work that AltaSea is doing could be a huge and impactful in the issue that was just raised about the fuel, right? So to give you an example of maybe how AltaSea is going to help on the shipping industry, and this is to maybe look into source of port pollution where current technology limits some of those options. So like the large ships, which carry thousands of tons of cargo to and from the ports, don't yet have a zero emissions alternative available when they aren't plugged in to shore power at the port. So it will take research and development to explore solutions such as the production of ships that run off zero emission hydrogen. It will take infrastructure investments at the port to ensure this hydrogen is available at our coast and produced in a sustainable way. And so that question I thought was a great example just to show at what AltaSea, the tie that AltaSea has on how to get there, and to the research and the development of how do we have this ocean economy and have it be clean. And so I just wanted to point that out because I think that actually makes the case on the work that AltaSea will be doing in helping explore and doing research and development. On the issue of the coalitions, it's so critical. In my understanding of the question is the importance of the coalition between business. Is that right? Just want to make sure I have
Yeah, between business and the environmental community.
Okay, so oftentimes there is a false choice. We hear it all the time. People say, oh, well, if you're for the environment, you're not for business. If you're for the environment, then that means that you're not for jobs. And that's a false narrative. It's not a choice, which is why when we were drafting this bill, we wanted to take the incentive approach as the incentive approach of a carrot, not a stick. And how do we get more businesses to want to produce this technology and mass produce it so it's more affordable? And so that's where getting together with labor, getting together with stakeholders was important to do, which is why I'm really proud of the bill and the coalition that was built so that we can have not just the environmental community say they're for it, but we want the labor community to say for it, and we want the business community to say they're for it. And when we have those types of solutions, we all win.
All right, great. Kind of a follow-up question to this. Somebody, Angel, is asking, what are some things that communities can do in order to make this change happen more quickly or be more effective? What can communities do?
On the bill or just generally on the environment?
I think both the bill and probably just the effort to green our ports. But the impression I got is to make this change happen. So it could be the bill or the general greening of our ports.
I will say, as a resident, if I may, Congresswoman, as a resident of one of these communities, born and raised in San Pedro, and like my father and mother, lived here my whole life, I think it's really extraordinarily important for us to embrace what the Congresswoman just said, that we don't have to choose between whether we want to keep in our community really, really great jobs and the environment. We can be for both. I mean, when we support the women and men of the ILWU, our longshore workers, we're supporting them in their jobs, but we also want to support their health when they're on the waterfront. We want to make sure that when those ships are approaching, that they're using zero or low emission fuels. We want to make sure when they get to the port that they're plugged in. And I think we want to make the commitment as a local community, whether we're the Chamber of Commerce or the local Sierra Club, that the commitment here is that what we want is a healthy, sustainable community where, the great jobs out on the waterfront exist, and also the really, really good jobs that are, hotel and restaurant workers and other folks that want to live in a healthy environment. And so I think as a community, we need to embrace what the Congresswoman just said. We don't have to choose between the two. We don't have to fight between the environment and economic development.
Jason, you wrote that book that had the interesting title, What Economists Should Know About the Environment?
What environmentalists need to know about economics.
So you've dealt with this bifurcation all the time, perhaps quite a false one, as the Congressman is saying.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm really glad this has come up, because this dichotomy is completely false, and it's promulgated by the fossil fuel industry and the toxic, emissions industries, right? They want that narrative, right? The reality is it's the exact opposite, right? The 21st century, if we could fast forward the end of the 21st century, what the most powerful nations are going to look like. They're going to be the ones that mastered clean energy, that mastered climate change adaptation, that mastered biotechnology, right? They're not going to be the ones that are digging coal out of the ground, right? Those are the 18th century technologies. And it's really important for people to realize is that there's more jobs now in solar and wind than there are in fossil fuels, right? Again, this is just a lie that's promulgated by these industries. They want you to, they want to poison us and keep back our economic development because they make a lot of money off of digging things out of the ground, but it's really a false choice. The last point I'll make in terms of the community involvement, I think the most important thing for people to do at the community level is to elect good leaders, whether it's city council, mayors, county supervisors, and outstanding congresswomen like we have here with us today. That is, that's our collective future, is our elected representatives. And so, especially the young people here on this, get involved with politics, take it really seriously, because this is how we make collective decisions. And if you want your community to be better, it has to have progressive people with vision.
Got it. This question I skipped because we kind of got into this topic, but Tim, it's really for you. It says, what is the estimated completion date of the research center? I think they mean the AltaSea Institute. And when will AltaSea be ready for startup occupancy?
Oh, fantastic. So in phase one, we have 3 projects in phase one. And the first project in phase one is the business center, that 180,000 square feet of business innovation. It's actually available for interim use right now. We have several tenants that are operating out of there now. Now we have to do a renovation that will take about 1 year. And we are very, very close to being able to commence that year of renovation. So we are saying late next year, we think the business center will be substantially open because we are looking at the pieces that we will build first, and we're working on our leases now with tenants who are going to require certain specifications. So about a year on that. Now the Science Center, and Nanette was talking a little bit about the importance of that research and new discoveries in the ocean economy. That Science Center is the warehouse that is to the north of the property. It's 45,000 square feet right now. We have schematic plans to make it a 60,000 square foot warehouse, our research center. And we are in negotiations on the development of that site that will be the home to the Southern California Marine Institute, a number of universities and campuses here in Southern California. And we are estimating that late 2023 is when that will be open. And then the third project in phase one will be the engagement center, the first point of entry. And we're looking at 2025 for that facility.
Great. For Mary again, this is an interesting question. I don't know if this is possible. Could the port restrict shipping that is not environmentally clean or acceptable? Standards imposed gradually, perhaps, or maybe incentive programs that benefit shippers who meet new, cleaner standards. That's interesting. How much power does a port have to say who can come in, who can't come, depending on their environmental score, so to speak?
As a former city attorney here in Los Angeles, can I hazard a comment on this?
Yeah, interesting question. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a city attorney now, but I used to play one on TV. So the Port of Los Angeles, even though it's a governmental agency, it's something called a proprietary agency. So it operates very much like a government, like a business. And it has some business principles, but it is owned by all of us, by the state of California and by the city of Los Angeles. And this port government doesn't operate terminals. What it does, it acts as a landlord and a regulator. And so there is a lot the port can do to require cleaner practices and safer practices. And there's a lot that the port has done. But the only thing the port can require, I shouldn't say that. This is more of an opinion statement. But the only thing that the port, as a governmental agency and as a regulatory agency, can require is stuff that already exists, technology that already exists. And so the tension for the port is to keep pushing that ball forward. And we should all demand that they keep pushing that ball forward and requiring cleaner and greener and safer. But we can't legislate the existence of a technology that's not yet been developed. Because if we legislate a technology that has not yet been developed and require a tenant that you can't operate unless you have that technology, guess what? Those jobs will go to Long Beach or to Oakland or to some other part of the world. And so the tension, the cat and mouse game, I'll call it that, is that we want to keep pushing the ball forward and make sure we retain the business, because while we retain the business here, we retain jobs and the ability to clean and green this worldwide industry.
Right. Question for the Congresswoman. Is there enough money to go around to all the ports? I think it's a fair amount of money. It's $1 billion, you said, for 10 years, each year for 10 years. But what kind of need is out there? Would this be enough to really make a difference? Or I'm not even sure how many ports there are, but I'm sure there's a lot.
So the reality is that we can always use more funding for ports across the country. One of the objectives here is that we have to have ports included in an infrastructure bill, and we need to start investing in the green economy and going green. And so I think this is a good start. Don't get me wrong. I want to see more dollars into supporting this effort. But we need to start somewhere, and I think this is a great start. And getting it to the finish line is the first thing we really have to do. Once we do that, we can start increasing the amounts that we're going to be putting into it. But I think this is going to make a huge impact, and hopefully the ports across the country will see this as an incentive to help them move quicker to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and the pollution.
Also, someone asked earlier, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to it, about what role do unions play in this whole investment into ports? Is it union employees? Are the ports required to hire union employees, or how does that work?
Well, there is, if I may, in the bill, in the Congresswoman's bill, there is a requirement for what are called project labor agreements. I think there are, and if I misspeak, I apologize. And project labor agreements are wall-to-wall labor agreements for construction, and which is something that this community, this is a union town, this community is very, very, very supportive of. The truth of the matter is that when you're doing significant work in a port, like driving pilings into the through the water and into the ground and building warehouses and building docks, you want union labor. You want high quality labor because there's a lot at stake. And so the role of union construction particularly is extraordinarily important to the infrastructure development of the port.
Great. This question I think is for Jason. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. It said the U.S. military is, I can't see it all, is a huge polluter globally. Does the bill include any provisions that affect the military? I read through the bill quickly. It didn't look like it did. It dealt with ports, which are not military. But is that right? According to this comment, the military is one of the larger polluters. Jason, what's your knowledge of that?
Well, yeah, in terms of the bill, I'll let the Congresswoman speak to that. But in terms of the military is very interesting in the sense it's obviously has a huge global footprint and huge fossil fuel use, huge emissions, but actually quite progressive in a lot of ways. There's a lot of green development going in. The climate change scenarios that the military are doing are quite scientifically advanced. So the military, I would say, is really going in the right direction. They just need leadership from Congress. And unfortunately, under the last few years, they've just gotten a blank check to just kind of, do new weapon system after new weapon system instead of smart investments to green their infrastructure. And but I think that there's a willing partner in the military if the leadership is there.
Your thoughts on that?
Just to chime in, the military is not covered in the bill. Again, this is a bill when it was was drafted to include stakeholders at the port and really incentivizing some of the goals that the port has now to go clean. So it's not included in this bill.
Got it. Let's see. We'd love to also ask, Jason, I wanted to ask you to elaborate on the essence of your book. What are a few of the other things that that environmentalists need to understand about the economy, and maybe vice versa as well, that would apply to ports?
Sure. Well, I'll just say maybe one general point that I think is lost. You hear a lot of people in America talking about the free market. Environmentalists want to interrupt the free market. They have it exactly backwards. The free market only works when people pay the damages that they cause. So every coal plant, every fossil fuel plant that is spewing pollution, that is literally killing American citizens and causing climate change, and they're doing it for free. That would be like if I crashed into your house and said, hey, I just destroyed your house, but hey, sorry, your house was in the way. I'm going to keep driving on. That's what coal companies are doing and what fossil fuel companies are doing every day. And so once you understand that for the market to work, the true costs of things have to be incorporated, then you realize that they're basically cheating the system. All of these toxic polluters are cheating the system. And there's a lot of powerful interest to allow them to cheat the system. And I think that's probably the most key thing is the market would work great if people actually had to pay for the damages they did. So if you're a chemical plant and you're poisoning the river, you got to pay for that damage. You got to clean it up. And then that would incentivize all the clean stuff because you would want to do the clean stuff. Now, the Congresswoman's bill is a good way to do that. If we're not going to make fossil fuel companies pay the true cost, we can at least incentivize the green stuff. And so there's kind of the carrot or the stick way. But I think the Congresswoman's bill is outstanding because unfortunately there's not the political will yet to take polluters on in the serious way that we need to more, at the federal level.
And if I could just
Excellent.
add
Yes.
to Jason's excellent answer, is the federal government is giving $15 billion a year in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. So this is not a free market. That's all.
Got it.
Good point.
So when they talk about the free market, the first thing you have to say, yeah, if there really was one. So interesting.
Exactly.
They're benefiting now. So
Well, that's kind of where it's a little off top. That's kind of where the idea of a carbon tax would come in, and all the kind of actually having them pay the true costs. So that's another topic. As we have a few minutes left here, I'd love to give you all some time for some final thoughts and some hopes for both what happens at our ports and what happens with the bill and what happens in Washington, or whatever you would like to discuss as we look forward to what I think would be an amazing transition at our ports, because it's not just the ports, it's not just the actual infrastructure, it's the people who live nearby who are paying the price and don't deserve to pay that price. So final thoughts on anything you'd like to address. We'll start with Tim. We'll go Tim, Jason, and then the Congressman.
Perfect. I want to go back to something that the Congresswoman alluded to that I didn't have a chance really to speak much about, and that's the importance of research and development and the unique role that AltaSea can play in research and development and scientific endeavors at our site, and literally across the plaza from our science building will be this business incubation acceleration building, so that folks like Jason can take their ideas that they're researching from the research bench and set up a company. A professor or a grad student can set up a company just across the plaza and we can capture that technical transfer right here in the Port of Los Angeles that is so extraordinarily important, where we do research that will catalyze business, and business will push research. And our idea is that all of it will engage the community, and our community is not just a local community, it's a regional community and it's a worldwide community. So for the sake of community and for the sake of research and for the sake of business, I think our job is to make sure that when the Congresswoman's bill passes, that we figure out ways to capture that $1 billion a year right here We're going to come up with all kinds of great ideas for how to further electrify our port, to how to introduce technologies around robotics that will help us with sustainable ocean farming, all of which can help green the ocean and clean the air. So we're really, really, really excited to be able to work with researchers and business folks and public officials like Nanette Barragán.
That's right. And there will be many ports
We don't care about
competing
we
for
want
the money if this passes. And we've got to get in there with good ideas and be ready to launch them. And I should say that I believe that, is this correct, Congresswoman? That the grants are, I think, for about 75% of the cost of any given project. So the ports do have to bring some money to the project. Is that correct?
You know, I need to confirm to see what the ultimate bill had in it, because I know this was a back and forth. But my memory of it is that that we didn't require that. But you know, let me confirm to see what the final bill had in it. Because I remember there being a percentage being talked about, 70%. So maybe I think, let me confirm, because maybe by the time Jason is done, I'll have an answer. Because now that I'm talking about it, I'm thinking it was a 70% for the federal government putting in. So when you circle back with me, I'll be able to get a final.
That. I think I remember reading that. So, Jason, your final thoughts, and then Congressman.
Sure. So, you know, again, I think environmentalists often are kind of accused of being against things, right? And what I really love about the blue economy is that it's an affirmative vision. And so let's just take the ports, one small slice. You know, fast forward 10 years and the Congresswoman's bill is passed, AltaSea is chugging along. And what is the port? It's the most high-tech, zero emissions electric vehicles, amazing clean technology. The boats are slowed down with new fuels. The whales are not getting hit. They're surviving. We got AltaSea with new aquaculture and robotics technology. We got a visitor center. We got huge new aquaculture for industrial chemicals, for foods. We have coastal restoration going around for the climate impacts. And now you can see a vision and you go, take a look at, you know, and that took me 30 seconds, right? Isn't that vision better than what we have now? Why would we not want to invest in that vision, right? That's the way to go, right? And so I think environmentalists in the blue economy, we need to put forth this affirmative vision. And I think people are going to come around to realize that this is where, you know, this is where the government has a positive role in fostering this type of investment.
In fact, Jason, didn't you write some kind of ocean climate action plan? It sounds like you gave us a great summary of that right there.
Yes, so we're working actually, and I'm sure the Congresswoman will be aware of this too. You know, we're working with the House and Senate on some larger ocean climate bills that we're hoping will come to the Congress in 2021. And you know, and so I'm sure we'll have a supporter in the Congresswoman, and we are, you know, absolutely behind, you know, all of her efforts.
Well, that was a very exciting vision of the future that you painted there. It's hard to say anything but fantastic. Full speed ahead on that. Okay, as we wind down here, we have a couple more minutes. Congresswoman, we're going to give you the final word here.
Oh, well, thank you. And I was able to confirm that the federal government will provide up to 70% of the cost. And so it is 70%. There's also a set aside of a minimum of 25% to fund areas that have not reached attainment. They call it non-attainment with the Clean Air Act criteria for pollution, which our area is a non-attainment. So that's also, I think, will help direct dollars to areas like us that really need the funding. And so as we close here, I want to just reiterate the importance of AltaSea for growing an emergent ocean economy centered around innovation is going to be critical for the sustainability of our coastal communities and our ports. You know, we face so many challenges in the 21st century, including how to feed the world as it warrants, creating good paying jobs that cannot be exported overseas, and addressing the climate crisis. So the work that AltaSea is doing in these areas, including empowering the next generation of scientists to bring forward solutions that create jobs in our coastal communities, is so important. So working together, we can help elevate the Port of Los Angeles and our coastal communities as the global leader for these pressing issues and ensuring the world that we pass on to our future leaders and future generations is sustainable and prosperous. And so I'm looking forward to getting the Smart Sports Bill across the finish line, but also in partnering with them on new solutions that we can for the sustainable future. And I'm very excited about all the work AltaSea is doing and the partnership that we have. So thank you all again.
Well, thank you for giving us your time, your hard work, and hanging in there. It's a tough climate there in DC, but it's so wonderful to know that we have people like you who are really working for constructive change. Thank you so very much. And I'd like to remind everybody that this has been recorded, and you can go on the AltaSea website to share it with others, or to, if you missed part of it, watch it, share it, whatever you like. And that there will be other AltaSea webinars coming up. Is that correct, Tim?
That is correct, but don't ask me to tell you what they are and when. I didn't bring
It's all on the website, AltaSea website.
It's all on the website. Go to altasea.org and click on Project Blue, and you'll see all of our great stuff.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank the audience for your participation. Your questions were wonderful, imaginative, in all directions. We hope that we answered most of them for you. Again, my name is Val Zavala, Tim McOsker. Thank you so much, Jason Scorse, and Congresswoman Nanette Diaz Barragán. Thank you. I said her name right. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next AltaSea webinar. Take care.
Thank you, Val.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.